Turning the achievement and disappointment question to Ward 4. You're a ward council person.
Yes.
A little different perspective than a council person at large. But of course the two are complementary, PLE, to each other. But from your Ward 4 perspective, what has been a Dominic Fonte fostered achievement, and what on the other hand has been a vexing problem to you that you don't feel there's been enough progress on in resolving?
Good question. So as far as ward, one of the big afflicted issues that we've had for years, and this started way before me because it's been happening for years and years, 20, 30 years, which was the Zimber Ditch. Okay, so John Schneider got Kurt Schuring involved way back when, but we didn't have the money, and the afflicted people, we had 18 people on our initial list that were afflicted and frustrated because their lives were in shambles. So when I took over, we had public meetings. I had a lot of communication with Representative Schuring. We were able to secure several grants and money to basically take care of all 18 on the initial list. So all 18.
So you finished off the work that Snyder started.
Right. He started it, and then in the last 3 years we were able to actually complete the project. There's the last few people that are taking the information, the appraisal, and if they take the voluntary buyout, then they'll be satisfied as well. And then they'll demo the houses, and it'll be more Stark Parks territory, and they'll maintain it.
So that has to be very gratifying.
It's very gratifying because that was a huge afflicted area. But here's the other part. I'm the chairman of Streets and Alleys, which affects my ward as well as the city. And so as a councilman, I'm like, what is my job supposed to be? Well, it's to legislate, appropriate, and discuss laws, right? Well, as a chairman of the Streets and Alleys, what we basically have to do is I keep an eye now, because I'm self-employed, so I drive all throughout the city. I do a lot of work in the city with, real estate. So I'm always looking at the drain grates. So a lot of the drain grates, because we do such a good job with the snow removal, the salt eats away at the bricks and mortar that are down under the street, which collects the water, which then sends it down, which goes that direction. And if it overflows, of course, it goes into Zimber Ditch. So now we replaced probably close to 300 of those in the last 2 years. And part of it's because whenever I see a sinking drain grate, I call it out. They put a cone on it, get it on the list. And this is a huge infrastructure issue that pertains to the draining as well as the streets, and the proper flow. That's an important thing, the Zimber Ditch. And one other thing that happened.
So are you disappointed that you haven't gone fast enough?
Well, here's the disappointment. We only have $800,000 in the budget to do the roads. And with the limited budget in the roads, it's like this. You're at the airport, you're in a jet, you're taking off, but it takes all that extra energy to get that plane to cruising altitude. Well, since the economy was bad for a few years here, we didn't have the money really to do it. So I talked to a lot of the members as well as the engineer, and we're going to bump the budget up to $1 million this year. Part of it is when you think of blacktopping, you have we got a grant for Everhard Road, South Main, the part of South Main from Rose Lane to Knoll.
Are these in Ward 4?
This is in Ward 4, and also Whipple. So Whipple, heading all the way down, is going to start next year. These are grants that are going to save the taxpayers money because we were able to get the help. And also on Everhard Road, we're going to change the lanes to 2 lanes going east instead of 1 lane going east, because at 5 o'clock the traffic always backs up. So we have a lot of exciting things happening. The thing that I was frustrated by is 2 things. One is the binding that holds the blacktop together. So in my opinion, we should spend a little more money on the main streets, South Main, the busier traveled streets, to have a better binding that holds together in the zero weather. Because a lot of times the binding that they use to save money would only be good to say 12 or 15 degrees. So if we get a 0 day, then it's going to pop and fall apart. So my recommendation is to the engineer and council is that we go ahead and we spend a little more on the busier roads, spend more money on the binding so they hold up longer. And then a lot of times they'll do the milling, so they'll mill down 1.5 inches of the blacktop. But if the foundation isn't good, then it's a Band-Aid approach. So some of the roads are going to need to be taken all the way down to the base. It's very expensive to do, so I'm pushing hard to improve and get more money into the budget, more grants into the budget to save us money. Okay? And then the second thing that surprised me. Law Director Fox sent all council a letter a while back about these cell towers. Since cell phone usage is almost like a fourth utility now because everybody has to use them, they said a couple companies were going to all the cities across the country and asking for placements of cell towers, which are ugly because they're just sticking them all over the place in neighborhoods. And in my ward, there were 2 places that they wanted to place them. When I got wind of that, I did a little research, and I said to the law director, how can they get away with this? And if they are going to get away with it by doing this, I want them to be camouflaged like trees and different things to blend into the atmosphere. So that caused a big shake when I introduced that to council. In a council meeting of the whole, I did a presentation, and it was a shockwave to the cell tower industry. So basically that cooled off now because they were looking for a loophole to bypass the city to go to the PUCO and say that we're denying them their opportunity, and all they were really doing was securing locations and then leasing them out. So I thought, well, as a city, why don't we just secure the locations, camouflage them so they look like trees in background, and then we lease them and generate revenue for the city. So that kind of cooled off, but that was one thing I was working on. And the other thing that I just introduced.
So is that still in works? And that's owing to your continuing frustration?
Well, what happened was I said that I want them to make, like if it's a background, if you look in Canton here, there's 2 cell towers side by side, it looks ugly. Now, if they look like pine trees or something, or disguised as pine trees, then you wouldn't really notice it. But see, it's more money.
So it's the aesthetics factor.
Aesthetics, absolutely.
And you're not convinced that you resolved that problem?
Well, what happened was it cooled off now, and they're looking at doing micro towers, which would be attached to either telephone poles or light poles, and they have to use more of them because they're not as high off the ground, and they camouflage and they'd work better. But at this point, I think it cooled off for now.
Okay.